Oh, does my bum look big on this screen? Last year, I gave a talk, black tie after dinner talk, and afterwards, rather than staying in the hotel room provided, I made my excuses, sneaked out the hotel, camped on the beach, under the stars. At dawn, went for a quick skinny dip in the North Sea, and I realized that much of the reasons that I'd done this were the same reasons for adventure that I decided to set off and try and spend 4 years cycling around the world. And if it's possible to have an adventure very, very briefly in England, then perhaps you don't need to go on a massive adventure, especially if an adventure, as I believe, is just about doing something you've never done before, doing something that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable, getting out of your comfort zone. And so I decided to put this to the test by trying to walk a lap of the M25. Now, the M25 epitomizes everything that's really depressing about modern-day first-world living. It's dull, it's boring, it's just everything that is awful. And I thought, if you can find adventure here, then surely you can find it anywhere. So I set off to do that. Now, one of the most important things for me on any journey is the landscape, the scenery, being out in the wilderness here, paddling down the Yukon, hundreds of miles from the nearest settlement. This sort of connection with nature, the sense of being out in the wild, and a bit of a reboot for the soul, I suppose. So trying to find wilderness is important for me wherever I go, and I really doubted whether it would be possible to find that walking around the M25. But I was wrong. Here we are, the hills around Kent, Surrey, junctions 4-5. I'm a bit of an M25 geek now. And I realized that the beauty's out there anyway. You've just got to take the time and the effort to get out there and have a look for it, and you'll start to find interesting and exciting places. An important part for me on all expeditions is a healthy dose of misery, cycling through Siberia in the wintertime, and I'm really curious about pushing my own physical and mental limits and seeing how far I can push until I break. Or, as one friend described it, it's the pleasure of enjoying banging your head against a brick wall for the pleasure of stopping in the end. And so it's quite strange to be searching for this dose of misery in suburbia, trudging through somewhere pretty minging like Leatherhead, somewhere like that, with your feet hurting. We only had a week to get around the M25, so we had to put in really big days. We were doing about 14-hour days, and it felt quite strange to be in physical pain as you're walking past chip and kebab shops. Camping's really important for me on expeditions. Partly it's very cheap, but it's also, again, a connection with nature. Camping here on the plains in central Turkey. At the end of a day, to cook a simple meal, to sleep out under the stars, to know what state the moon's in, to be in tune with the weather, feels like a really important thing to do on all journeys. Walking around the M25, we decided that having a tent was a bit too luxurious, so we just slept under this plastic sheet. Now, sleeping under a plastic sheet in the coldest week in decades, or whatever the Daily Mail said, is, if nothing else, it makes you grateful for getting back home again, getting back to a nice warm bed. And that's an important part of all expeditions as well, being grateful for what you've left. Food is a vital part of expeditions. You spend a lot of time dreaming about food. Last year I walked across southern India, coast to coast, fueled by the beautiful meals presented on banana leaves, eating with your hands. Always it's eat as much as you can meals down there, so pretty good for the hungry walker. And also meals always lead to interesting meetings with people as well. Walking around the M25, I feasted on my daily diet of cheeseburgers, although unfortunately we didn't have any burgers or cheese, so they were actually just ketchup sandwiches. And this sort of asceticism, this minimalisation of life, as well as being a tight Yorkshireman, is a really important aspect for me of journeys, and again, teaches you to be grateful when you get home, grateful for a full fridge. A few people tonight have touched on the importance of people, the people you meet on journeys. These are some Tibetan Buddhist monks I met, very kind, friendly people, and enjoying a laugh and a joke with people is great on trips. But when you come back to England, everyone's so grumpy and miserable, and you quickly get depressed. And I wondered whether everyone in England was actually miserable. So going on this adventure in Britain was a good test for that. This guy in the middle is Matt. I don't know who he is, but he was following our progress on Twitter. And when we got near to his house, Junction 14, Heathrow Airport, he knew we were near, so he popped out on his bike, found us, took us home, and fed us an enormous fry-up. Rob ate 7 sausages, and that was great to find kindness in the UK. The big project I'm working towards at the moment is an expedition to the South Pole, and as a way of gradually getting myself towards that ambition, I've spent the last couple of months up in the Arctic, which is a long way away, but great training for just getting used to living in those sort of isolated, wild, beautiful, and harsh conditions. The nearest I got to being Ranulph Fiennes around the M25 was when we found this kid's sledge near Rickmansworth, Junction 17, and hauled our stuff on the sledge. I have to point out that we found the sledge, we didn't steal it off a small child, but this is as close as I've ever been so far to being a proper polar explorer. It seems that almost everyone who's done a talk tonight has run the Marathon des Sables through the Sahara Desert, and something I really enjoyed about that was the self-sufficiency. You had all the kit you needed. If you'd forgotten something, all the money in the world wasn't going to change that. You had what you had no more or no less than what you needed. And you were also your own boss. You stood or you fell by your own decisions. Around the M25, we abandoned the sledge and then found a shopping trolley. Again, I say found, not stole, and now we were starting to turn into hobos, old ladies crossing the road to avoid us with good reason. But I love the spontaneity that being on an adventure gives you, the chance to just go out and you never know what's going to be around the next corner. All adventures tend to have a goal, some sort of objective, and the objective itself is not always important. Rowing the Channel last year with an injured soldier, getting to Calais wasn't really the point. It was all the experiences we had leading us towards that, and by setting yourself a goal, it's just you start to have all sorts of exciting and interesting things along the way. But you need a bit of stubbornness and perseverance to keep on going. Around the M25, we didn't really have a map, so it involved quite a lot of jumping through fences, mild trespassing, going through gardens, schools, and a lot of golf courses, through hedges, all sorts of things that we never expected to find trudging around on our way to our ultimate goal, the Dartford Bridge, our holy grail. My final slide is about 50 metres away from the M25. Morning rush hour, traffic jams, everyone grinding and slow and depressed and frustrated. If you step just a tiny bit away from that, you're going to be walking on your own. The routes may be a little bit more difficult, but you're free to make the choices you want and to find the adventures you want. And I think this just sums up for me what it's all about, finding your own path and going for it. Thank you very much.